Welcome everyone. Just a reminder, if you've joined us since I mentioned this a few minutes ago, if you want CLE credits for this call, you can just type your name and email in the chat box at the end of the call. I'll ask those of you on the phone for your names and email addresses if you're not an AMM member, so that we make sure we get the certificate to you. If you are a member of AMM, we should have your email, be able to take care of that. I am recording this session. All of these sessions this week are being recorded, will be posted on our website. We're here for the 5th session of our ABA Mediation Week webinar series. Today's topic is how mediation can help you. My name is John Richardson. I'm one of the board members of the Association of Missouri Mediators, and with me today via video is Jim Reeves, who is also a board member and shared with us yesterday, and Peggy Lukken, who's a board member of AMM, who is with us on the phone. This webinar, this particular topic might yield some questions or thoughts. So what I'm going to do as moderator is ask Jim and Peggy to share some thoughts on this topic of how mediation can help people, and very broad topic. So if you have questions, ideas, thoughts you want to share, if you can put it in the chat feature as a question to the organizer, that will come to me, and I'll do my best to feed those questions to our presenters. So right now, I just want to ask both Peggy and Jim to share a little bit about how they got involved in mediation, their background as a mediator, and especially their interest in how mediation helps the people who we're working with who are in conflict. So Peggy, I'm going to turn it over to you to start. Share a little bit about your background as a mediator and your interest in this topic.
Thank you. Yes, I've been doing mediation for about 5 years now. And I went through my basic mediation training and sat through the 3 days and thought, I still don't feel like I'm competent to help people in conflict. So I started looking for other resources and ended up coming across Creighton's dispute resolution program. They have a master's program for dispute resolution. And I went ahead and got a master's in negotiation dispute resolution through them. And that taught me so much more and so many wonderful things that I can do to help people in conflict. And through the years, I've done, I've touched on lots of different styles of mediation, topics of mediation. But my favorite seems to be the family law mediations, parenting plans, that sort of thing. And it's really it meets my need to be a helper, and being able to help parents develop a parenting plan that will work for them, because I know in the end that will help the children grow and be successful and well adjusted. How about you, Jim?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I've been involved with mediation since about 1991. So about 26 years. I was first trained at CDR Associates in Boulder, Colorado. Spent a week out there after exploring the field locally. And at that point, there weren't really very many places to get training in the St. Louis area or in the Midwest. So I headed west, and I felt like the process was exactly what I thought it would be. That is, just really eye-opening, providing an opportunity to help people solve problems, work through relationship issues. I just absolutely fell in love with the field, and I returned to CDR Associates about 4 years later in 1995 to explore a process design and designing systems to implement into organizations, and look at the field a little deeper and learn more about its applicability to various contexts. In 2004, I went to the University of Missouri and got my LLM in dispute resolution with a concentration in organizational leadership. That fit nicely in the practice that I have. I was a litigation attorney for about 20 years. And in 2004, actually in 2003, left litigation and opened my practice. It's now called ClearBridge Consulting. And I have, through the years, practiced mediation in a lot of different contexts. I work with organizations, so I work with large groups, I work with individuals. I've done community mediation. I'm on a volunteer panel in St. Louis County in the family court, in the juvenile division, doing victim offender dialogues. I do IDEA mediations through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I'm on several panels for federal agencies. Most of those are EEO and workplace disputes, but I also get involved in union management disputes, not so much the collective bargaining side, but more on how can management and unions work together more effectively within organizations. So it's an incredibly satisfying process, and it's also, personally and professionally. But really, outside of myself, what I really enjoy is coming into a situation when people so often feel helpless, and they feel lost, and they think there is no way we're going to be able to fix this. And to sit down with people, give them an opportunity to talk about what is going on with them, and to help them figure out ways of making a really uncomfortable situation comfortable, livable, and maybe even better than what they thought it would be. And that is one of the most satisfying things about mediating that I have found is to come into a place that there seemed to be just an atmosphere of hopelessness, and to walk out having really tangibly helped people build a better situation for themselves.
Jim and Peggy, one of the things that was true in my experience in my profession, and for those who are listening, I'm more of a community mediator, pastor, conciliator in faith-based, a lot of faith-based disputes as well as others. But my experience coming here, I went to 4 years of college to be a pastor and 3.5 years of seminary to be a pastor, to lead a church. And in those 7 years of education, there was not one class on how to deal with conflict. And I'm assuming other professions are the same. We train people to get out there to be business leaders, and even to be husbands and wives. But my point is, the field is kind of ripe to help people, because overall in our culture, we've not done a good job of educating people and helping people to be prepared for the real life conflicts that we have. All that to lead up to my question for each of you. How much of mediation and helping people is education and helping people to understand how normal conflict is in our lives and in our workplaces?
Yeah, I'll start with that. The word education, I think, is really key, and I picked up on that when you mentioned it, John. I think as mediators, we educate in a lot of different ways. One is just to help people understand what mediation is and how adaptable it is, and the difference between a mediation and an arbitration, for example. For mediators, it's pretty basic question, but for people who are not trained in mediation and are not really aware of the process, they don't really understand what mediation means. They might have kind of a concept of it generally, but not really understand the importance of it and the usefulness of it. The other piece of education, I think, is as mediators, as we are working with participants in the process, we are educating in that we are modeling. We're modeling behaviors that assist people in resolving disputes. We model good listening skills. We model communicating in a way that's not inflammatory, but still expresses one's desires, needs, interests, emotions. I'm working with an organization right now. It's a university I've been working with them for several months, and I'm working with faculty and administration primarily on the issue of shared governance, and I'm using air quotes because that term means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But as I am working with this organization, I am, I hope, modeling shared governance in the process design, how I've set up the process. It's been very interactive, very participatory, how we communicate, how transparent we are with the process. All of those things, and I keep reinforcing this message to this group, is we are modeling, this task force is modeling for the rest of the university community what shared governance means. So I think there are a couple pieces of education that come into play in what we do.
How about you,
And I'd
Peggy?
like to add on to the education piece. I think a large part of what we do through is educating people and how to be aware of their own behaviors, how their behavior influences other people, awareness of the impact of their words, or maybe even awareness of their own feelings. How do I identify my own feelings? And I think that's a powerful piece of it as well. And I think often we do those things without even realizing what we're doing as mediators. When we ask someone a question of, what was it like when the two of you were communicating effectively? That's educating them, and that's increasing their awareness. And it becomes when we understand why we're doing what we're doing, we're even educating ourselves, then that makes our efforts even more powerful because we more effectively know how and when to use those sorts of phrases. So I think we're teaching ourselves through the process as well as teaching our participants. And then we're also sharing with them and teaching them that conflict is okay. It's about a growth process. No, it's not comfortable. I don't know of many people that actually enjoy being in conflict. That once we teach them that this is okay, it will be fine, and teach them how to get through it, then I think that tends to shift their perception a little bit and maybe even calm their emotions to a point where they can actually engage in a more effective manner.
Wonderful. If you have any questions, any of our participants, you can type it in the chat box, and in just a moment I'll open up everyone's mics if anyone has any, if you're calling in. But Jim, Peggy, any other thoughts, key points that you want to bring up about how mediation helps people in conflict?
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead, Peggy.
And helping, I think one of the biggest things, the most powerful tools that we hand people is the time and space to be together. A lot of times I think that there are so many distractions, even emotional distractions, when people are in conflict, that they can't just sit and be together and engage in a conversation. And it never ceases to amaze me how effectively people that say they can't communicate can communicate when you give them that uninterrupted block of time in a neutral location that they can actually sit down and engage with one another. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know what? I want to tag onto that. I have a love-hate relationship with technology. What we're doing at this moment, to me, is amazing, is to have multiple people on a conference and to actually be able to see each other talk. That to me is amazing. But I also told the story in my segment yesterday about being on the train platform here in St. Louis. I was taking the train over to Washington University. And literally, I took a photograph with, ironically enough, my iPhone of, and I counted 15 people standing there with me on the train platform, two of whom were engaged in a conversation, laughing, talking. Every single one of the other people were looking straight down at their iPhone. And they're doing this and they're doing that. And I'm thinking, wow, our culture, our society does not encourage face-to-face interaction, which is the most, to me, powerful interaction. And so I want to tag on to what Peggy said, and that is we do provide that opportunity as mediators to put the distractions aside, put the time aside, and help people have conversations. We tend to converse via email. We tend to converse versus Twitter. And to me, that is not conversation. It is some form of communication, but it is more often than not constructive and helpful. And I think we do provide that forum for constructive conversation and to really give people an opportunity to learn about each other on a much more personal level as human beings.
I completely agree with that. And, you know, we're seeing it societally, where people are having, it's essentially a one-sided dialogue with each other about, you know, politics would probably be the most apparent one, where they're just surrounding themselves with like-minded people and they never want to hear or even expose themselves to opposite points of view. And I think that people get entrenched in that belief system, and then they have a more difficult time when they're faced with someone of an opposite view, that they don't really know what to do with that information and they automatically default to defensive. So
Yeah.
Again, that space, being in presence with another person, humanizes that other person, and it changes the dynamic, and it opens up the opportunity for people to hear differing views.
I had just last week a father come and talk to me about a conflict that he and his adult daughter were in, and I asked him to explain it to me. And to your point, he showed me the string of text messages that they'd had. And I said, so that's the argument. Yes, the entire conflict and argument was just on the text messages. And I said, so have you spoken since then? And it was just shocking that hadn't occurred to him or her to put the phone down and talk. So I think you're right on with what the opportunity is for us to help people to connect and to really make those relationships. I'm going to do something right now for all of our participants. I'm going to unmute everyone and just give a moment if anyone has a question for Jim or Peggy that you want to ask. So okay, so everyone should have the ability to ask a question. Does anyone have any questions?
Hello, this is Kathleen Bird.
Please.
One thing I run up a lot against is when we offer mediation services to people, they're usually pretty frustrated and they're very quick to say, I already tried to talk.
Great question. Yeah, we already tried to talk. You know, when I've had somebody say that to me, Kathleen, I get curious about what that conversation was like. What was the context? What was going on? And, you know, find out a little bit more about what the conversation means. It's interesting because when people say, hey, we already tried to talk, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And sometimes they really have tried to talk and it has not gone well. And so I think there's where we step into a little bit of education and talk about the attributes of mediation that might be of help in terms of communication. Talking about what a mediator does and what a mediator does not do, but ultimately how a mediator can help with that conversation and encourage people to try again, but with some help. And that's my short answer. I think that's it's a common situation that, yeah, we've tried to talk, but it hasn't gone well. But I think we can add another dimension to that conversation.
Peggy,
absolutely, and Yeah, just to tweak it just a little bit, one of my favorite things to do is to ask people, why do you think you're not able to talk? What do you feel are the barriers? And then that just gives them more opportunity to kind of, decompress. And it also gives me some insights onto what tools do I need to have at hand, potentially walking into a joint conversation with them, that I can actually facilitate that in a way that ideally they don't realize that it's not them that's actually initiating the quality conversation. So they feel more empowered, and that I don't get blindsided by something that would automatically get us stuck from the start.
One of the things that mediation does is it gives a place to be understood. And sometimes I'll ask a person like that, we've already tried to talk. Have you felt understood? Have you felt heard in this? And so takes it to another level. They might say we've talked, but if you want to know if I really feel like that person's hearing me, no. Well, this process is hopefully going to build a safe place where you're not just talk, but you actually hear and you're understood. And maybe that can lure some people to join us.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions anyone has? One of the things that I was thinking about was just when I think about how mediation helps people, there are so many opportunities that this brings. Opportunities for the individual parties, opportunities for the culture, whether it be the culture of the relationship, even if it's two divorced people, the culture of a business, the culture of a faith-based organization, a nonprofit. So we come in and we do this work of mediation. Jim and Peggy, speak a little bit to how this might even help the culture of this dynamic, whether it be a marriage, divorce, family, business. How are we impacting the culture?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that question on an organizational level. Organizations have cultures. It's we have all walked into different offices, for example, and you look around and you see the artifacts of the organization's culture. Are the doors open or shut? Are people interacting or they're not interacting? Does it seem stifled? Does it seem tense? Does it seem relaxed? How's the place decorated? Everything you just, you can walk into different offices and get a completely different feel. And often I'm working with organizations that do not have a conflict welcoming culture. And it's really challenging for people to have a conversation in those kinds of environments. Conversations that we have in organizations do not happen in a vacuum. They happen within this broader environment. I hope that the work that I do, working with individuals or teams within organizations, help to, I'll use Peggy's word, make people much more aware of more open communication, the ability to solve problems, the ability to talk without feeling defensive, or feeling defensive, then what to do about that, how to communicate more effectively. And that, in a way, is changing the culture. The university example that I gave you is we're very much dealing with culture in the background of everything that we do. And I have mentioned the word culture many times because we are, as a core group, as a task force of about 22 people, really spreading what we're doing throughout the faculty and the administration on that campus, as well as some other constituent groups. And so, yeah, changing that culture, I think, is a real possibility in what we do, so that the entire environment in which conversations take place is much more positive and welcoming.
Peggy, any thoughts?
And that can be, Yeah, that can be distilled down to, micro level with, just the culture between two people.
Yes.
And how we help them understand that culture that and that dynamic that they're operating within. What are the rules of conflict within their culture? How do we as neutrals identify that, connect with it, and help them use their rules to help them engage in a conflict effectively? Just making them aware of, through reframing, helping them listen to the other person. Sometimes we have to, even though they're speaking the same language, we have to interpret that message for them so that they can develop understanding. And sometimes people don't even realize what they're saying as they're saying it, and we're helping them understand their message. So there's a lot of, and granted, in one mediation or 7, sometimes the light bulbs will go off immediately and the culture will shift. And other times, all we can do is create awareness and hope for the best.
Great.
I want to share a quick story along those lines, and I agree with you. I think of individuals, Peggy, as their own culture. Also, they have their own system. I had a mediation in it was an office of the Veterans Administration, and I had 2 people, a supervisor and a supervisee, who were really not getting along. And so I was mediating with those 2 primarily, but sitting in the room with the permission of everyone was the director of the facility and the president of the union of that local. And they sat and they really didn't participate very much. We worked through some issues, and in a couple of hours came to some great understandings about how these 2 people were going to work together. Things like, how come you never say good morning to me in the morning? And those kinds of things. Sometimes it's that simple. That, to me, is a cultural thing. It's also an individual thing. But what really struck me is at the end of that session, we were walking out, and the director of the organization came over and literally took me by the arm, and she said, "Jim, in this 2-hour session, I have learned more about our organization and how we do things and how we don't do things than I have seen in the 7 years of my position." And sometimes those little micro conversations can bring out such awareness on such a broader scale, whether it's in a family, whether it's in an organization, whether it's on a team. It goes back, I think, to education and awareness, and what those conversations can provide to people and their surrounding environment.
I have another question for both of you, Jim and Peggy. When you're mediating a case, when you're in the middle of mediating and in the middle of the sessions, what are you watching for in the parties that would help you to think they might be getting this, that you're actually helping them, that the process is helping them? While you're mediating, what are you watching for that if you see this or hear this gives you a little indication that they're getting it and they're being helped?
Peggy, go ahead.
Most important, and this is just my own personality style and what I connect with most readily. For me, it's body language and energy.
Yep.
I'm constantly watching people for, what is their breathing rate? What does their body look like? What does their face look like? Are their words matching their body structure? Are they, physically reacting when the other person is talking? Are they disconnecting? To me, the body speaks more honestly than the words that come out of someone's mouth. So that's what I'm constantly on the watch for.
I completely agree. Words are one thing, but there is an energy in a room that is so hard to define. I call it positive reciprocity. There's a giving and a taking. There's an energy. It's a positive energy. And I have for a few years tried to define it, pin it down, give it a name. I don't know what that is. I've talked to experts in nonverbal communication. Everybody's got their own name for it, their own term. But it's like when we walk into a room and we have walked into the middle of a conversation, and you can feel the tension or you can feel the relaxed environment. It's a feeling. And I think as mediators, I hope we are in tune to that sort of thing. But watching the visual cues of nonverbal communication and just feeling this is much less of a tense environment in which we're working. The energy is much more positive.
Wonderful.
On that note, it's something that I utilize. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's something that I utilize when I notice a shift. I identify it to the participants, if it's appropriate, obviously, and that will help magnify it. And it is something that you can feel, and feeling the opposite way. If you notice that things are starting to tense up, I also identify that. I'll pause the conversation and say, I feel like things are getting more tense rather than less tense. Can you help me understand what I'm feeling here? And then that draws some attention to where people might be feeling themselves getting worked up again, but not noticing it. Mm-hmm. So it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's an awareness, helping them build awareness, and also checking in as a mediator. You see something that just doesn't seem right, or something said, or it seems like it's getting tense again, and checking in with that person. What's going on? What's happening? Here's what I'm sensing. Am I sensing this correctly? And also what's going on? And sometimes it has nothing.
So if I could share a story about that, it's just something that happened recently, and it just completely made me smile. I had a couple that were convinced that they couldn't communicate. We can't even be together. They came in, they were completely tense, and by the time we were done with our mediation session, the woman was humming. The tension had all washed away. They were relaxed. They were communicating effectively. They had remembered that at one point they were friends, and by the time she was leaving, she was humming. And that told me everything I needed to know.
That's awesome. That's a good note to conclude on. Jim, do you have another thought?
No, I just get a lot of background noise.
Yeah, I'm at the place right now. What I'd like to do is before we sign off, if anyone's on the phone and you want CLE credits, could you please let me know your name? So I'm not hearing anybody. If you're on the phone and you want CLE credits, or you can email us through the website. And if you're on the computer and you want CLE credits, please type your name in the chat box with your email, and we'll make sure we get a certificate. I'm going to mute everybody again and then sign off. Jim, you're still with us?
I am with you.
And Peggy, you're still with us?
I am.
Okay, so just a couple minutes. Jim and Peggy, any last words on this topic before I sign us off?
Peggy, well, if anyone needs to bounce some ideas around, needs assistance with getting started, needs to talk through a challenge, I'm always available and happy to help in any way that I may. You can Google me, Peggy Lukken, and my email address pops up anywhere. It's Peggy@cottagemediation.com.
Yeah, and I would add on simply that Many of us are building practices in mediation, and I think in terms of our topic of how can mediation help you, I would stay with that theme when we're trying to talk with somebody about mediation and build our practice. I would encourage people to be the giver. Don't try to sell mediation. It's not sellable. You can make people aware and educate them, and don't worry so much about building the practice, but be the helper, and have kind of a giving mindset of willingness to help, as opposed to trying to look at this as a business. It's a kind of a strange concept, but I think there is a lot of help that we can do as mediators, and that's the mindset that I try to hold on to, and I would encourage all of us to do that.
That is really, really cool.
Well said.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Jim, for leading us today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. This has been provided by the Association of Missouri Mediators for the 2017 ABA Mediation Week. AMM is an educational networking organization that connects mediators across the state and works to educate the public on the process of mediation. Please find out more and visit us at www.momediators.org. This concludes this webinar and this wonderful experiment of Mediation Week webinars. We'll be posting these on our website. Look forward to doing this again. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Peggy.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.